Hey, hello everybody. So I'm going to be making a little video, a little bit of feedback video on my first AOC meeting. Misses the mark. Bit of context on who I am. I'm a former pro and grandmaster. I also ran for AOC, and I wanted to make this video to explain some of the flaws and what the current AOC is doing. So obviously not everything can be talked about by AOC, right? So maybe some of the stuff I talk about was mentioned, who knows. Also, another disclaimer, this first meeting, from what I can gather, was scuffed. Like, everyone was new to this whole AOC thing. There wasn't enough time for the meeting itself. There wasn't enough time for people to get ready before their meeting. So quite a few of these things can be explained by people just being new. However, I'm just going to work with what I got because it's content. And I want to get feedback, and there are some issues that can't be explained by people just being new, right? So we're going to generally follow the same outline as Syberbolt's video, since that's what I saw first. I believe Alive, Parallax, and I think it's Jamie, whatever he's called. I think they each put out videos. They're also shorter. So anyways, let's dive right into it, right? We're going to start off with Hyuga, right? Same order as Syberbolt's video. I heard about Hyuga that some of the things, or even all of the things that he said, were just off the top of his head because he didn't prepare for this first meeting. Which, like, that's not great. That's okay. We're getting off on a bad foot here, right? Especially as someone who's been on AOC before. So, on to actually what he said. So he talked mostly about talents, right? So Syberbolt said in his video, his gripe is with legendaries that give damage buffs and nothing more. Overall, the devs agreed that they don't like this either. So spot the issue here, right? There's no explanation. There's no why, right? So if you either don't understand why something's an issue, or if you can't explain why, or you don't explain why for some reason, then that's not really good feedback. Now, the obvious response here is that, just straight damage buffs don't create unique playstyles, right? And they're just kind of boring. But his examples are Fusillade and Yomi, both of which change playstyles, right? And then he doesn't bring up like Burst Mode and Shrapnel or Steady Aim and Eagle Eye, and those playstyles like barely change between each other at all, right? So either he doesn't understand Fusillade and Yomi, or he missed 4 talents, right? And Syberbolt also explains later that a suggestion that Hyuga made as a potential, like a solution, would be to replace Fusillade with Reign of Terror, which was an old talent where it buffed salvo. Like, I think it fired instantly, and I don't remember if it did more damage, and it lowered the cooldown. So he wanted to replace Fusillade with this old talent, and Syberbolt said that would be bad because it would be stronger, it'd be spammy, and be abusable. I don't really know what abusable means here, but the point is that these are different things, right? So if you look at all this, right, this is all just sort of evidence pointing towards the current AOC not explaining their thoughts very well, right? If there's so many potential reasons why they want something to be changed, well, did they really explain themselves properly? Or are they just kind of, throwing darts, right? So it could also be that Syberbolt messed up in his video. There might just not have been enough time to explain things. Neither of those are good, right? Like, if Syberbolt is neglecting to mention explanations in his video, that's not great. And like, first impressions have been made. I can guarantee you that like some people have already made up their minds on this AOC based on the Syberbolt video. So, and then again, not having time to explain things, that wouldn't be great either, but that's like more understandable. So going back to Fusillade and Yomi, right? This is where I would normally, like, because I mentioned that Fusillade and Yomi change playstyles, right? So this is normally where I would, explain the difference between like Guillotine and Yomi, and Worm, Combustible, and Fusillade, right? But instead, I'm going to make the point that if you're an AOC watching this and you don't understand these differences, right, then you frankly don't have any business making your own personal balance decision about these characters, right? Because if you don't understand it, how are you going to give good feedback about it? As a solution, since you're a community rep, you could either look for feedback from the community and actually just take initiative instead of like waiting for someone to post something into your Discord channels, which I have seen SterileTick do multiple times. I've seen Syberbolt do it a few times. I've seen Hyuga do it once. This is also just English-speaking AOC members. I don't really follow the other ones because it's not like this, not really useful for me. You could also look for feedback from former pros and high-level players, right? Most are willing to put in the time to give this sort of feedback. So the good part in this, though, is that the devs did immediately shut down the Fuselage rework ideas with ideas that I personally agree with, right? That Fuselage changes the playstyle enough, and that, hitting direct shots should be rewarded, so 10 points to the devs. Hyuga also talked about, like, other talents. They all had the same sort of flaws in their argument, and that there was no argument, so I'm not really going to bother. But again, this is potentially a one-time thing. If this all gets fixed for the next meeting, then we can just write it off as AOC getting used to the whole AOC thing, even though this is Hyuga, or it could be like Syberbolt. So again, I'm holding judgment on this, right? Moving on a bit, they talk about Scuttle Dredge being distracting, and that like people don't want to play the game, they just want to kill the dredge, which like, does that happen? Like, I get that clearing up visual clutter is good, but I don't know, that reasoning just seemed like really weird. Hyuga also talked about IO, and he had ideas about it. This isn't from Syberbolt's video, it's from an AliveARG stream that one of my viewers, Demi, was very kind enough to translate. He suggested making lifelink heal for 500, but healing for 15% less with Moonlight, which is like, that's just weird, frankly. And that's the sort of thing that can't be explained away by it. Like a scuffed first meeting, right? Like, this idea is just weird. It's probably not going to work. It's not going to feel good to play, most likely. It's so out of left field, right? Paladins is not your testing ground for your aspiring game design ideas. People want you to improve the game, right? Nobody wants you to design Paladins 2. People want you to fix Paladins 1. And he made more suggestions too, right? That wasn't the only one. He wanted Luna to apply item effects, which, like, that fixes none of the issues that IO has right now. And if you don't understand the character and the issues, then you shouldn't be making your own personal balance suggestions about those characters. You should be looking towards the community. Show me anyone in the community who's asked for lifelink to heal for 500 healing per second, but heal for 15% less with Moonlight. Are you really taking the community's feedback here? And even when you do go take initiative, right, which again, only SterileTick, Hyuga, and Syberbolt have done so far, it feels like these Twitter polls that they're making are just using the community to gather evidence to support what they already want, right? Instead of listening to the community to push for what the community wants. They're using the community to support their ideas instead of supporting the community's ideas. And to top it all off, right, the reason that the devs don't want to change IO, the reason they disagreed with him, was because of win rates, which means that Evil Bojo is balancing by win rates again. Which I think that balancing by win rate thing is just such a fantastic idea, right? It's just a good reason just to have to not address any of your game's design issues. On to ParallaxQueen, so she also made her own video. So she brought up how mapped rank rotation sucks, right? People, how do I say this, right? People are only really excited for new map rotations because it means they won't have to play freaking Fish Market every other game, right? Like, I'm going to be happy when Brightmarsh comes back. Does it mean I'm going to play ranked more? Of course not. Like, I don't know. It's just weird. So, again, like, it's a cool idea, and good feedback is just, I don't know, man. Sometimes the devs just, really? Do they really think people play ranked more? When, like, my favorite map is back, yay! Like, really? She brought up free bans. Everybody wants free bans, please. Like, if anything, just so second pick bans can have some variety, right? Because second pick bans are going to be banning Yagoroth and, like, Octavia at this rate every game. So, I don't really know who's against free bans, right? Everyone is either neutral or in favor of it. Parallax also said that it's a question of when this happens, not if this happens. But, like, our timeline is by the end of the year? For something that's realistically not super complicated? So again, it's just a bit weird, right? She also asked for the report for cheating option. I can't help but wonder how long people have actually been asking for this. It has been years, literally years. She also suggests making all attacks that all quote-unquote weapon attacks, all attacks that come from a weapon, apply item effects, which, first of all, oh my god, stop messing with the item store. Bad things happen when you mess with the item store. But for actual feedback on this idea, because in Parallax's video, she does explain her ideas, right? In Syberbolt's video, they don't get explained, right? But in Parallax's video, they do, which we're going to go back to that. So she says like stuff like, weapon attacks. Stuff that comes out of your weapon. So like Nando Fireball, right? And Vora's Siphon, or whatever. Like anything that comes out of your weapon. But then she brings up Hurl Dredge against double shields and double support as an example, right? So it's just like, Hurl isn't a weapon attack. That doesn't come out of your weapon. Broadside, sure. But Hurl, it doesn't actually come out of your weapon. So on top of being inconsistent, right, there's just a general bit of power creep here, right? Like overall, this would, increase the strength of some characters. And it's fine if characters have weaknesses, right? So I don't really like this change. However, I can see where she's coming from, and I can understand her points, which is more than I can say for most AOC members. She also talks about Guillotine. She wanted it to be a total of 100% of the target's damage instead of the current 125% of the current target's damage. So Hi-Rez' response to this is that, quote, they intend it to be a direct counter for one enemy that is giving the team a hard time, end quote. This is nonsense, right? This is like saying we're going to give worse players an easy way to kill a player who would otherwise outskill them, right? Like, there is absolutely no way that A, this is a good thing to have in your game, B, that they think that this is actually how it's used. Like, it's nonsense, right? It's just an execute with like almost no counterplay. It's so much value for hitting Zinal, which, let's be honest here, that's not difficult. It's just like, what do you do against it, right? So, intend for it to be a direct counter for one enemy that is giving them a hard time. That's just a nonsense response, right? And they said it'll be addressed at some point, and that maybe they'll remove the extra alt generation, which that's not related at all to why it's unhealthy and bad for the game. But, they might do it sometime. And then how does the AOC actually react to this, right? They don't say anything. They don't, like, there's nothing that shows, like, it feels like they just gave up. They're just like, damn, we tried, go next. Like, there's the potential. This is an area of the game where they could have a really big impact, right? Balance. It's really easy to give feedback for balance. It's really accessible for players. It's very important to a lot of players. It's usually not like game-changing things, right? They're usually fairly easy to implement. This is a really big place the AOC can have an impact. But does the AOC care enough to actually push for this and improve games? Like, think of how many times you've just been playing a game and just like, oh, the other team has a Zen. He's going to hit his button, and then someone's going to die. And if it's me, there's nothing I can do about it. Like, that is not fun, and the AOC just does not care enough. They just don't care enough to change it. Parallax also brought up Cassialt, which, like, oh, Khan's damage is fine, execute ults are fine, some characters being pretty much unplayable, that's fine, but Cassialt, damn, that's a pressing issue. We gotta get on that right away, right? So, even the fact that this gets brought up, right, it just shows that the priorities are way off, right? Now, it's also important to mention that this was apparently, again, from her video, not from Syberbolt's, more of a community-requested change, right? And more for the sake of consistency, right? Like, she was saying that reveals should be counted as CC, right? And therefore countered by resilience, right? And that, okay, sure. I don't really agree. apparently it would take a lot of time to program that. But like, I can see where she's coming from. However, right after that, she suggested that, okay, well, if we can't, if we can't make it affected by CC, maybe we nerf the duration, right? But then, like, again, she brought up that it's uncounterable. But if you nerf the duration, then it's still uncounterable. It's just weaker. So what's the actual point of this? Is it for consistency? Or do they actually think that Castiels need to be nerfed? I don't know which, because they don't explain themselves properly. She also brought up a plus 100 HP buff to Eevee. This, again, was from the community. Taking feedback from the community is cool. But I feel like this should either be ran through someone who knows Eevee very well. Like, I think I brought this up to Penguin, and Penguin was like, oh god, that'd break the character. So, something like that, right? Or you bring this to Evil Mojo if it's like a very common request, like guillotine nerfs. Because otherwise, this is just one person, right? And one person might not have either a good take, or they might not represent the community at large. She was also pushing for a Makoa change, where he resets his cooldowns when he ults with his base kit instead of having to do it through Leviathan. This was explained as it's supposed to be a Makoa buff. Again, this, like, it just misses, right? This is essentially a soft rework to the character. It just misses. If you want to buff Makoa, that's not how you do it. That's not what his issues are. And if I have to explain it to you as an AOC member, then you shouldn't be making your own suggestions on it. She also talks about bringing back Flank Nando and, like, please, I want my baby back, please. He doesn't have to. He said he doesn't even have to be strong. Just I don't want Flank Nando to be playable. Later on, Evil Mojo also says that they're happy where off tanks are. Ah, yes, being happy where off tanks are, because banning 4 of them in ranked is fine. This is fine. This is what a healthy meta looks like. Right, of course, my bad. I forgot. She also starts talking about wanting Furia buffs, and this is somewhere where I can help a lot, right? I like to consider myself a decent support player. I play a lot of Furia. And Parallax basically says, why would I pick Furia when I could go like Seras or Dompa, right? So I don't think that's relevant. I don't think that's a relevant comparison, right? You pick them for different reasons. Seras might be a bit like overstated and taking Furia's niche a little bit, but I think, it's not really worth comparing Furia and then Seras and Dompa because, Furia has her own niche and she's performing well in that niche. If you do want to buff Cherish, right, instead of buffing Cherish so Furia is just more like the other supports, you don't buff the healing, you make Cherish do Cherish things better, right? So like a buff to the Raft Decay or a buff to Ruthless card, that would be a better way to go about it, at least in my opinion. There's also the fact that, like, I think it was, if I did the math right, an extra 100 heals uncotted would be the suggestion, which, like, that does not matter, right? And then Hi-Rez also shot this idea down because of win rates, so good stuff. We're still balancing off win rates. So she also mentions Grover shouldn't be able to find the teammates anymore. Yes, that is cool. That is good. It's a nice idea in theory, but it's really frustrating in practice. And also, I want to talk about Parallax's video. She, when she was talking about Hyuga's ideas, she was basically saying that, like, Hyuga was talking about a bunch of talents, right? So Parallax was basically saying that, the devs didn't want people to feel like, there's only one meta talent. There's one way to play this, right? So I think that, again, misses the point because reworks, sure, reworks should be a last resort. But if you're buffing or nerfing talents, you're doing the opposite of trying to make one meta or, whatever Hive's Sphinx talents changes are trying to do. If you're buffing or nerfing them, you're trying to, give people more talent options, right? You're trying to make them all viable. You're trying to make them all balanced. So honestly, like, my main issues with Parallax seem to be that, like, it feels like she's taking ideas from, like, one random person in the community and then bringing them to AOC meetings instead of the community wants this, right? It's less the community wants this and more one person in the community wants this. So, and then if they do suggest that, right, Parallax either, like she said in her video, right, she doesn't play certain champions enough or know the game well enough to like know if it's a good or bad change, but then she doesn't bother checking, and it just goes straight to Evil Mojo. So I'd much rather that like she actually takes feedback from the community instead of like one specific person in the community. So for Alive's bit, first of all, for Syberbolt, why do you smack talk ranks so much? Like, can we not shit on people for enjoying something that you happen to not enjoy? Like, cool, it's your brand or whatever, but this is like reverse gatekeeping, which that's not very cool, and that could like even potentially hurt the game, right? And if ranked is like so awful, then maybe you could have suggested things to like help fix that problem. And if you're not interested in, then I know a lot of really dedicated players who are, and they could, you know, give feedback as the community. So this 2 internal queues idea is just frankly like dumb. Like that's not going to work. Matchmaking is an impossible problem to solve. There's not going to be any good solutions, only like less bad ones. But this whole 2 internal queues, right? This is what I mean. AOC brings us these ideas to Evil Mojo. They say the community wants higher quality matches and is willing to wait longer for them, which I agree with, especially as like someone in like Masters GM. But then they suggest like something really dumb like this 2Q system. Like, no, let the game designers design. Your job is mostly going to be feedback and this sort of stuff. Hyras also said that matchmaking isn't something they're really invested in right now. It shows, we can tell, you say improvements can be made? Really? I never would have been able to guess. They also say that Matchmaker does its best to find... Okay, this is a quote actually. Matchmaker does its best to find players of similar skill level, but after a certain amount of time, it just force populates the match with anyone else waiting. This is very dumb. Like, I'd just love to see someone else suggest this as an improvement to any other company with a multiplayer game. They'd laugh at you. Like, at this point, the matchmaking is so bad, I do not even care if I get plats in my game. I'm in Grandmaster, or Masters, depending on the day. But I don't even care if I get plats. I just do not want to get matched with golds, or silvers, or bronzes, because as a former pro, right, who's in these really high elos, right, I can get silvers and bronzes in my game. I have a screenshot. I made a whole video on this thing, right? I've got a screenshot of a match made. There is one of every single rank, from bronze to Grandmasters, and the fact that this is even possible is shameful. And the solution isn't even that complicated, right? Like, don't let people get matched with other people who are too far out of their ranked, right? And whatever too far is like up to the devs, and that depends on internal numbers and all that stuff. But more than 3 whole tiers apart is absurd. Like I don't even know, right? It's like Hyras is saying, this thing that we don't want to happen is happening. We have complete control over whether it happens or not, though. We just don't care enough to fix it. It's not a priority for us. And the community obviously doesn't care about matchmaking either, because the AOC hasn't told us that this is what the community wants. For SterileTick, he talks about, again, talents, I think. I think Sterile actually made a poll, like, hey, what do you guys want me to talk about in AOC? Which I think is fantastic. So he brings up Resonance, which I just want to touch on Resonance real quick. There's like a cult for people who play Resonance. Like, the people who play Resonance are crazy, right? Like, you know, like super high level Yings. I don't know if anyone here remembers the really old forum posts, right? Like, I would not touch Resonance. So you know that meme where the guy shoots someone and then asks, who would do this? And it's like a funny meme and all that fun stuff. So that's Evil Mojo with Solar Blessing, right? They cut the healing in half, they reduce the speed of the beam, and now it's like, oh no, I can't believe Solar Blessing isn't doing too well. After these 2 massive nerfs we gave it, just revert the nerfs and see where it lands. Like, it was played at a high level before the nerfs. It kind of got power crept, but it was fine before you hit it with 2 massive nerfs. if that's not enough, right? If you do revert the nerfs, then you could like add an indicator like Grumpy Bomb has for teammates, or you could let Furia stop the beam again by hitting the button again, right? And I feel like those would be the way to go. And I know that I am giving suggestions when I just like I've been being mad at AOC for doing the same, but I'm going to be frank here. Every Solar Blessing suggestion to fix the consistency issue so far has been absolute horseshit, and I'm tired of people being dumb. That's mean, but like, come on. Then for clarity, because I think Syberbolt messes them up, or the script messes up, or something like that. Solar Blessing, awful right now. Cherish, A-tier support. He also mentions that consistency tends to win in these sort of things. No, sometimes the risk and reward is worth it, right? There's a reason that people play high-skill characters, like, you know, stuff like Meavy Maeve. Those characters are very risky, right? They're very squishy. They'll pop in an instant, but the reward is worth it, right? So that's not right. So, like, there's some good thoughts here in Sterile's section, but some of the suggestions I didn't really like. But the feedback itself is good. So now on to JaimerasPlay. I might be butchering that. Syberbolt says Jamie, sure. So this guy also made it an AOC video, so that's cool. So this guy's very first suggestion, very first AOC meeting, he's gonna go in, guns blazing, he's gonna suggest an entire new way of monetizing the game. Which frankly, like, you realize this stuff is complicated, right? People go to school for this. I feel like he's got good feedback with the issues, but instead of actually giving the feedback, he's moved straight on to solutions where I honestly doubt that anyone in AOC has the qualifications to actually give solutions for a problem so complex as game monetization. Like, the feedback part, that's good, but why are you giving solutions for this? He also wants Spirit's Domain to be buffed. He said it was a troll pick. He didn't even explain why, and Syberbolt didn't explain why. I don't think Parallax explained why. And those were the videos, like the Syberbolt video and the Parallax video were the two English ones, so that's all I watched. So again, I can't criticize this, right? Like, how am I supposed to know, like, either how he wants it buffed or like what issues he has with it? So I want to take this because I want to give good feedback here. I want to show like an example because, frankly, the feedback being given right now is not good, right? So I've played a lot of Spirits Domain Grok because I stream, and my stream has a channel points reward where chat can make me play Spirits Domain Grok. So the talent right now is not very strong, right? It's not really viable. So I don't think it needs a rework. Like, I have fun playing Spirits Domain as it is. I think the talent is only weak right now because of its low output, right? Even if you have like a totem on someone and you're healing them, you're just not really doing comparable numbers to the rest of the supports, right? So I think some people have an issue with the way that the talent heals, right? You're healing with your in-hands. I think it creates depth instead, right? The main reason that you're going to take Healer Grok is going to be for his ult. And since in this game, doing damage builds your ult faster than healing, you have to sort of strike a balance between keeping your team alive and building your ult as quick as possible. So if you want the talent to be more viable, I would suggest moving the healing per second of the talent from 700 to 900, right? So this would be a really quick and easy change, right? If this doesn't work, and the talent does need some like programming change, some rework, like the Shock Pulse heal was an idea that's been getting thrown around for a long time, this wouldn't take anything away from that, right? It'd probably be place tested a little bit to see if 900 is a good benchmark. And there's also a low chance of it being like too strong, right? Too much of a buff, because it was previously at 900 back when you had one totem, right? And that wasn't even considered that strong. And if this does work, then we have a viable Healer Grok. And that's really it. Like, I could probably think of some cons if I wanted to. Like, you know, you don't want to like buff something then immediately rework it. Like, that seems a bit weird. Since the character revolves so much around his ult, you don't want a healer who's just feels really strong when he's ulting but weak the rest of the game. You know, so like you could probably pick up some cons with this, but overall, I think it'd be a really easy change. I think it'd be really effective. I think it could potentially add another viable healer to the game. And if you disagree, then I hope I explained why I want this change made well enough to the point where we can have a good discussion about it. Next up is TanaDisney, right? So she brings up disconnect icons first, right? So Evil Mojo doesn't want this in their game for some reason, right? But if someone's a bot, right? This is dumb. If someone's a bot, you can already tell they're a bot. Like, there's even visual cues. Their title disappears. Their items sort of go rainbow. They still have trouble getting out of spawn. They move in a very certain weird way. They use certain voice lines at certain times. They can't be whispered in game anymore since the player's gone. It's very, very obvious if you know where to look, right? So all this change does, all that not adding a disconnect icon would do, is just remove information from the player, right? And ideally, you want to communicate information clearly to the player. Syberbolt also mentioned something about like toxicity, right? Because I know that's like what Evil Mojo wanted, was like limiting toxicity, or like that doesn't make any sense, frankly. So like okay, what did they even say? I forget. Hold up, I'm gonna take a small break and check. Okay, I'm back. So Syberbolt says that they don't want the disconnect icon because it's another opportunity for people to like be toxic or whatever. Do they think that not having a disconnect icon is gonna like, is everything perfect and peachy right now? No. Like, if people know there's a bot on their team, they're gonna be reasonable. They're probably you're gonna get better reports on people who do quit games. And like, they'll probably even be more reasonable knowing that it's a 4v5. Like, you're not winning that. So, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me, personally. So, I don't know. Syberbolt also mentions that limiting about toxicity, right now it's like always going to be a thing. Limiting toxicity is a good thing. I have linked a GDC talk in the description. It's 3 minutes long. It's called Trolls, the Cost of Doing Nothing. It's there if you just want to find out more. Basically, it shows that there is a monetary loss if you don't do anything about toxicity, so something should be done about toxicity. For Syberbolt's part, not gonna lie, when I saw his main menu idea, I laughed. I think it looks awful. However, he has some very good points with his UI feedback, right? Like, all the inconsistencies with buttons and menus and stuff. Like, this is really good feedback. I didn't notice this stuff. This is good. But I can't help but feel like the UI guy that he talks about is just gonna like take the feedback and then disregard the little MS Paint art project that he made. So, and just to like emphasize why this is good feedback, if you had applied the same levels of explanation that some of the balance changes, some of the talents rework have gotten, this would be as if Syberbolt had showed up with his mock-up and saying, I think the main menu should look like this. And like that's not helpful, right? So like this explanation is why this is good feedback. Evil Mojo also said if players want to learn more about the game, they'll go outside the game to do so. Yes, but if you make it easier and more accessible, people are, more likely to learn about the game, get more invested about the game, and like have fun, and then maybe even spend money. Like Smite has a fantastic learn tab. I think pretty much everyone wants something like that in the game. It's a simple solution, right? Like they barely have to make any new content. These sort of tutorial videos are already made. They're on the YouTube channel. I'll probably link it in the description if I remember. So all Evil Mojo would have to do is just implement a tab, put the videos in there, and like make some sort of nice UI, right? And there you go. So, but instead right now, they're just sometimes in like the bottom left main menu scrolly window thing. I don't actually know what it's called. Random tangent. Did you know that Smite has a VGS minigame? It's honestly fantastic. I forgot what def card I have equipped, not gonna lie, so this whole toggleable def cards is a cool idea. Nice feedback. When he talked about his let your teammates know you're affected by COT, I kind of got confused because it's already in the game. And like, if he means different levels of it, then like, oh no, you're telling me I have to look at the tab menu and take the other team's builds and items into account when I play the game? Oh no, like, let's not clutter the screen anymore because people didn't want to hit the tab menu. Syberbolt also says that Evil Mojo is always looking to improve the things you wouldn't think would be a priority for them, and he says this like it's a good thing. Like, no, no, the game doesn't need, like, these little things. No, there are big issues with the game, frankly. Like, the servers, the bugs. Like, we can talk about the servers and bugs. This entire first meeting could just be servers and bugs. But no, instead we're messing up with, like, the item store. And we want Dredge's broadside to work like seedlings? Like, no, this priority is just, like, way out of whack. The report a match for having a bad server is a thing that exists in Smite already, and it's fantastic. I'm not sure how much it actually helps, but it's there, and I think it's good, so. Syberbolt's feedback in Syberbolt's video was actually really good, right? I honestly think that's just because of his own video, so he was, like, able to explain his thoughts a bit better. So, main issues with this first meeting in a nice little summary, right? The most random things were brought up, like nobody cares about Cassialt. They somehow have the balls to suggest reworking entire talents that people like, and even monetization in specific ways, but they somehow don't have enough confidence to talk about, like, balance. Some important things were not talked about or glossed over, like, again, servers. They barely talked about them. The response was basically, oh, we might do something in 6 months, probably more, right? Like, bugs in general were not mentioned. The AOC also, like, when they brought up the disconnect icon, right? Hi-Rez gives a poor reasoning for that. And then AOC just kind of goes, oh, okay, yeah, this is something that AOC wants. It's something that community wants. But yeah, sure, Evil Mojo said no, so I guess it can't be in the game. No, like, this is something important people want. Stand up for the community, please. And then probably the biggest thing, but also one of the more explainable things, there's just no explanation for some of these things. It was just random and it's impossible to give feedback on because, again, I don't know why AOC wants some of these things. So to sum it up even more in one sentence, right? The AOC's priorities do not line up with the community's, and they do not explain their ideas well enough for them to be useful, and some of their ideas are just bad. However, this was the very first meeting, right? So I can forgive the missing explanations. Again, the priorities are still weird, and they've got to stop suggesting things that they have, like, no clue about. Like, it feels like this is almost an ego problem already. Like, it feels like they're saying, I know what the community wants, and I know how the game should be designed, which, like, no, that's a bit weird, so. Anyhow, potential solutions for all this, right? 3 things. I want the AOC to actually explain themselves, actually give reasonings for the thing that they're suggesting. If the AOC does not understand something, then they either need to listen to the community or to players who know the game very, very well, ideally both. And then they need to actually listen to what people want instead of bringing up Cassialt and wanting Dredge broadside to work like Willow Seedlings. Anyhow, that's gonna sum all this up. Hopefully I wasn't too mean. So, yeah, I hope that this helps and is good feedback. So, I'll be making another video that might be out already. I don't know. I was gonna talk about other videos, then I realized I upload, like, on a non-existent schedule, so we'll see what happens. But anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time.